So unlike the layer or sample controls, the filters, all of these controls here actually affect the entire plugin. So if you're doing a big chunk of sounds with both layers firing at the same time, in this case you've got carpet tennis shoes run with cement boots with heels loud. I mean, that is a beautiful chunky thing. And then the same way we can go to a close-up, use the different layers and be... And notice the pickups of both sounds come together, which is super, super dope. But what if we want to make them come closer, or make them feel like they're going away, or just add some fun effects? Well, that's where the filter comes in. It works just the same as it does in an analog synthesizer. You can just turn down the cutoff. A cutoff is whatever center frequency matters to the filters that you selected. Here's the filters that you have at your disposal, from low pass, band pass, high pass, and all kinds of fun ones. The default is the Moog low pass, which works fine. So check this out. Right, it brings down those high frequencies. Now, if I decide to select a bandpass filter, the only frequencies that you hear are centered around the frequency that you selected. And then the high pass filter kills lows, till you have the entire sound, or only those high bits. Notice everything else is kind of taken away. So we'll go back to the low-pass filter. Resonance, there's a lot of ways of describing resonance, but for this, the easiest way to describe it is, as you turn up resonance, whatever frequency you've got selected on the cutoff gets super amplified. So check this out. That's super amplified. Pretty cool. All right, so let's turn this down for a second. Now, ADSR, that's this bit right here, just like on an analog synthesizer, and just like we have up here in the form of attack and release, this applies to the filter only. Now, to make this part work, you have to have the envelope depth knob up. Once the envelope depth knob turns on, it begins to bypass the cutoff. It's influencing the cutoff, but basically at full power, whatever this ADSR says is what's really happening. So right now it's up full, and ADSR is at its shortest and longest setting. But if I turn up the attack, notice it's taking a long time for that filter to open. And as I bring down the cutoff, notice it's going from closed to open filter in a short amount of time, to the point where it doesn't even come all the way open in the time of the sample. Decay is how long it takes after the attack for the signal to drop down to the sustain level. And the sustain level you can make actually lower than full if you want to really punch up some of these sounds, including clothing and hits and things like that. It sort of begins to act like a compressor. Let me show you what I mean. So if I bring this, bring the sustain down 9 decibels, and I make this decay very, very fast, notice how it's pinging now? Whereas if I turn envelope depth off and the cutoff back up, fine, dandy. But I bring this down and envelope up, it's got a real ping to it, and I can control how much hit that is by how low I make that sustain and how, well, let's actually make the attack fast. There we go. Oop, down you go. And notice this is on all keys, not just on one. Now I've got a real smack to these footsteps that I didn't have before. And then with release, it's just, how long does it take for the release of the filter to get to 0? Usually we leave that up unless you want kind of a sound. If we turn up resonance, you can really hear what the filter's doing. It's going, the attack is coming instantly up and the decay is bringing it down. And as we release, the release is coming down. If I take the release all the way off, it drops it off, and if I leave it all the way up, it stays up just fine. That's how the envelope depth works with ADSR. And then obviously the master filter for all of it becomes the cutoff. And then if we turn resonance down, there's that. If you really crank it down, I mean, it becomes a hit in and of itself. Now, if you get too crazy with your filter and you're like, how do I return it back to zero? No problem. You just go here, recyclable filter, and everything gets back to normal. Over here in the dynamics section, the default is that the volume, overall amplifier, is controlled by velocity. So as I hit this quietly and then harder, it gets louder. Now I can control how sensitive that is with the dynamics curve. So if I bring down the dynamics curve to its lowest setting, no matter kind of what I do, whether I hit it loud or soft, nothing really changes. If I bring it up to its full setting, then it's very sensitive, depending on your taste and your technique. You can also change from velocity to a MIDI controller, like in this case CC1, which would be modulation, and that will control the overall amplitude. If your technique, if you don't really like to be, if you're not pianistically inclined and you don't want things to get louder, or you just want it to be nice and uniform and you control the overall volume, that's totally doable here with the mod wheel. Perfect. Now, one of the most powerful things we can do is the dynamics to cutoff. And what that does is send your velocity or your MIDI controller number, controller data to the cutoff. And if you have the envelope depth up, it also affects that. So let's bring this up to about half or 3/4 or 2/3 or whatever that is. They said there'd be no math. We got the cutoff here around 3 or 4K. And we are doing velocity. Notice as I hit that harder, the high frequencies move and also the cutoff knob moves. So I can bring this all the way up here, and very light touch makes it go down about 2/3. And of course, bringing up that dynamics curve gives you even more control. But to me, where I like to use it is with a MIDI controller, in this case, modulation wheel. So as the footsteps get closer, the high frequencies expand just like they would in distance to camera mixing, which I love that. And you can do this with the bandpass, you can do it with anything, any of those filters that are built in. And again, this happens to all the footsteps, so you get all of them firing in that cool, hey, it's not just a simple volume motion, it is the filter and the volume all put together. So with the filter section and all of the banks that are available in both layers, you have all kinds of capabilities to be able to change sounds and then, create all kinds of performances, and not one of them is going to sound like the next, which is another really great reason to have a MIDI controlled library instead of just the same old audio files that you got to deal with time and again.
Even if you're stuck.